Hi, darling. Welcome back. Since we were kids, we were sold this idea that if you work hard enough, you will succeed. If you basically put effort into your talent and refine it and put in the work, you will succeed and you will have a better life. This is very much in alignment with this concept of meritocracy. And what meritocracy means is basically the idea that you can work hard. If you work hard, you will basically succeed. People should be awarded certain privileges because of how hard they worked. But on today's video, I want to add a very different point of view in the sense that I will be using the public township schools and the private schools to show that this idea of meritocracy is actually quite flawed, especially in the context of South Africa. I want to be careful. This is not to denigrate. It's not to make people feel like there is the bad group and the good group. There's the victors and victims. It's more to say this is a privilege. We have to be able to look at a privilege without feeling a certain level of like you're being attacked. I'm not attacking people who went to private schools. This is not that. Before I go into the deeper layers of today's conversation, I want us to watch this short video that defines meritocracy.
Don't believe in the meritocracy. Everyone who is more senior, more highly paid, better educated is not necessarily smarter, more effective, a bigger producer, or a great leader. Let's face it, relationships, pedigree, and other things totally uncorrelated to one's success in the role often determine who gets in and who gets promoted. So once you understand that, you can begin to play the game and you make sure you are showing up buttoned up, that you are always demonstrating with confidence just how good you are. And enough with this imposter syndrome. Let that be for the people who really aren't good at what they do, but have been faking it, because there are plenty of those out there. There are real imposters, but I think it's fewer than half of the people who walk around talking about it are really suffering from it. I think you're better than you think you are.
A lot of the videos that advocate for meritocracy in the South African context have been very much around the concept or basically analyzing the failures of BEE or Black economic empowerment. And they basically, the crux of the argument that as I was reading articles on this topic were basically that BEE is promoting basically racial discrimination in the sense that it is still replicating, basically employing people according to race. And the argument was that it's actually promoting discrimination and inequality. My argument for today is that in a society like South Africa, there are definitely inequalities, and BEE is not this only thing that promotes that inequality in the sense that it promotes discrimination. What I want us to unpack is the different layers where, yes, BEE has its flaws, definitely, but the other systems that are also in place, the idea of meritocracy as a solution is not sufficient, because we see that in the context of South Africa, meritocracy works for some people, but we know that the large percentage of people didn't get to where they are based on merit and how hard they worked. We know that there is a lot of people who graduate who are highly intelligent, who work hard. We have grandparents who work hard, but there is no reward for everyone who works hard. Let's be honest about that. So the idea that meritocracy is this equal system is very flawed. Yes, BEE has its flaws, definitely, but BEE has its flaws. But meritocracy, as advocating for it, also has flaws. What I am going to come from today is from analyzing, to showcase and illustrate this, is through analyzing the public schools, the public township schools, and private schools, to show you just how much meritocracy doesn't work for every single person. Most people get to where they are not just out of meritocracy. But before I continue, we already know the issues of township schools. They're very old, they don't have a lot of good maintenance, there's no sports activities, there's no support, there's a lot lacking in the township schools. The schools are highly populated. Like, I know from personal experience that in my classroom, we were like 40 students in one classroom, compared to like a private school, which might have like 14 students in a classroom. But let's watch these videos that showcase a little bit of what is the differences between a township schools, or the issues of township schools, and kind of like the things you get when you go to a private school, like the soft skills. So let's watch these videos.
Iman, from the parents that we spoke to since morning, they are complaining about the issue of overcrowding here and how it is affecting their children. One of the parents earlier on mentioned that a single small desk accommodates about 3 children, and that their children are not able to receive enough attention from teachers because teachers are overwhelmed by the situation. And we are also told that some of the schools here, looking at the 2 primary schools behind me, are telling parents to buy chairs for their children, as there isn't enough furniture and there's a lot of children. For instance, the school behind me, which is Cosmo Primary 1, is meant to accommodate 1,080 pupils, but according to what we were told, it's currently accommodating over 2,400 learners. So you can imagine, Iman. But let's actually speak to another parent who's going to tell us more about the issue of overcrowding. But thank you very much for your time. You are a parent.
The culture probably needs to change from the government schools. Now, one thing that I will say is that there's a huge difference between an individual that went to a private school and an individual that went to a government school. There's a huge difference, right? You find that a child that comes from private school is exposed, right? They're exposed to a lot of things through the trips that they will attend, through even the kind of curriculum that they're going to have access to. Right now, you have students in private schools who are learning how to code, right? And then you've got Norma somewhere in the middle of nowhere who's in a government school. And probably the first time that she's going to hear about coding is when she has finished, she's even finished high school. But whereas there's a child in private school right now who at grade 3, grade 4, they are already learning how to code. They have trips that are organized for them to go outside of the country, to go and have different experiences. The kind of holidays that they even go, by virtue of the families that they come from, are very different. You find that a child that comes from government school has to work twice as hard. They have to work twice as hard. And again, there's also an issue of soft skills. You find that in private school setup, a lot of soft skills are dealt with. But somebody that comes from a private school, they will struggle. I've worked with interns that come from private schools and interns that come from government schools. And you can see the difference. The private school child, because of the soft skills that they've been taught, because of the professionalism that's already been, instilled in them, because of the etiquette that has already been instilled with them. They've already been taught. They know how to talk. They know how to carry themselves. They know how to be intentional. They're even more. They understand as well when they enter into a workplace. They understand how to relate with the boss, relate with everyone, right? They're just more intentional, guys. They're more intentional. And I really think that we also need to start having such standards being set in our government schools so that we can create some sort of balance, right? Create some sort of balance when people come into the workplace, because that lack of soft skills, that lack of teachings that the other guys have gives them an advantage when they come into the marketplace. They have a higher advantage when they come into the marketplace. And an individual from government school may feel like the private school child maybe is being favored, but no, it's not that they're being favored. It's because there are certain things that they've already switched onto that you still have to learn. You still have to learn how to engage with people. You still have to learn how to even just generally, be self-driven, know how to engage with different people, know how to maneuver even in the system. Another individual will struggle with that. Even in terms of just overall confidence as well, you see a huge difference between a child that comes, overly from private school and also from government school. So government schools definitely have to start having these kinds of lessons being inculcated into our curriculum. So
before I get deep into the topic, I want to talk about private schools. And the reason why I will be talking about private schools, I want to show you that the idea that every single person, all you need to do is to work hard, is to basically defeat inequality is by working hard, and that all the other systems like the policies like BEE are promoting inequality, when the meritocracy itself, the idea and how it works, it doesn't work. It also promotes a certain level of inequality, because not every single person who is in a position of power is there through merit, regardless of race. But we already know where most of the economic power is, where most of the wealth is. I don't have to racialize it. We already know. But what I want to do today, I want us to talk about private schools. We already know what makes private schools different from public township schools. Let's start with the easiest one, the price point.
These are the most expensive schools in South Africa. At number 5, we have St. John's in Gauteng, which is 331,000 Rand a year. Then at number 4, we have Rodin Girls School in Joburg, which is 337,000 Rand a year. Coming in at number 3 is St. Andrew's College in the Eastern Cape, 340,000 Rand a year. At number 2, we have Michael House in KwaZulu-Natal, which is 342,000 Rand a year. And then at number 1, we have Hilton College in KwaZulu-Natal, which costs a crazy 369,000 Rand a year. Here is an expanded list of the top 10 for those interested.
We already know that one of the reasons why parents send their kids, or some people don't know, let me not assume that everyone knows, okay? For those who know and those who don't know, let's clarify it. A lot of the times, parents send their kids to private schools, not only because the assumption is that better education or better educational opportunity, safety concerns and all that, or to protect your kid if you are very much a politician, a celebrity, or very high up in society in terms of your social class or your wealth and economic class. So it's that, but it's also some things people don't want to talk about and they don't want to mention. But as someone who has been in university spaces and has been in conversation and has been able to interact with people who went to private schools, some of the most things we don't talk about private schools is that in a private school, there is a very different culture from public schools. Not only are the schools systems of education, but they are they have this team building essence to them. A lot of them have sports teams, a lot of them have swimming pools, kayaking, a lot of them have these inbuilt systems, the culture of sporting, the culture of building this sense of brotherhood or sisterhood. If we just talk about the sporting facilities at private schools, they have swimming pools, they have kayaking, they do fencing, they do a lot of sports that I'm not even aware of. And through sporting, it's not only academic. Through sporting, there's also an exposure to sports scholarships. There's an exposure to not only academic stuff. And they go on a lot of team building exercises, like they go on camps, I literally was researching and I looked at St. Mary's website, and they even go on international trips. There is a level of exposure to the world and the inner workings and the soft skills of the world early on when you are in private schools. Not only are you paying for education, but you're paying for the soft skills, you're paying for the exposure, you're paying for your child to be connected. You're paying for connection to the individuals who run certain industries. We know this, or maybe I'm assuming we all know. People who are very wealthy, politicians, even black politicians, wealthy people, owners of banks, law firms, mining, they put their kids through private schools. It's a safety concern, but it's also because there is a culture there is a lineage, there is a certain... I've noticed a lot of them call themselves brother, old boys, old sisters, all that. I even remember one of my university lecturers. I think she taught me psychology at Wits, and I remember this lady went into our first lecture, and her first thing she said, "Where are the St. Mary's girls? Raise your hand if you're a St. Mary's girl." Like, there is this... I'm not going to call it a cult, but there is basically this thing where they have, it's like, we're a part of a certain system, we're a part of a certain culture. We have this sisterhood, we have this brotherhood that is built. They have this certain connection, and I'm not trying to romanticize this and be all kumbaya. I don't think everything is happy and flowers and rainbows in those schools, but the optics, the things that I've seen, there is community in those private schools, and you are not only paying for your child to be in a good school, you're paying for your child to be connected to wealthy people, to be connected with people in certain industries. I'll show you how. When I started varsity at Wits, I remember by the fees office, I was looking at a board. The board said feeder schools. Do you know what feeder schools are? Feeder schools are schools that basically feed into the university. The kids from that school go to that university after high school. I remember even someone asking me at some point, "How did you get to Wits?" And I told her, I was like, I applied. And they asked me, "Which Saint are you from?" And I'm like, I'm from a township school, girl. Like, I'm from a township school. I don't know this. It's like they had certain information I didn't have. It's like people from private schools are part of a very different culture. Universities have a strong connection. And one thing I will tell you, the connection is not only, it starts from the high school, you build those connections, primary, high school, there's those connections. Those schools are connected to universities. I'm not just pulling this out of the air. I've literally went on a deep dive to different universities and looking at the feeder schools. And the majority of the feeder schools for universities like Wits, UCT, Stellenbosch, UP are private schools. And a lot of them have feeder schools, which just basically means these are schools that basically have a long-standing relationship with these universities and institutions, and the connection extends. They are connected to the university, and they're also connected to industries. They're connected to companies, law firms, banks. So when you are going to these schools, you're not only paying for the luxuries, you're also paying for the connection. You're paying for you to be aligned with the people who own industry, the people who will basically help you with employment. Because this is anecdotal, but every single person that I know who went to a private school that I went to university with is employed. Every one of them. And this is not for me to say, we must basically say negative things about private school kids. This is not that. Nobody controls who they were, which family they were born into. Some people were just born into wealthy families, some were born into poor families. But this idea of meritocracy is exceptionally flawed if we think about the fact that people get into certain industries not because they are smart, not because they're intelligent or they work hard. And it's not to say these kids don't work hard, or people who went to private school or township schools don't work hard. There are individuals who work hard, but let's not act like the connections you've built in those spaces doesn't open up doors for you, because they do. Those connections, being friends with so-and-so's son who is an owner of a bank, being friends with so-and-so who's politically aligned, that opens up certain doors that we're not even aware of. A lot of the private school kids that I went to university with, some of them had personal relationships, like with the vice chancellors. They literally could go into the vice chancellor's office and communicate about certain things. And that's something a lot of township kids don't have. We're not exposed to the soft skills. We're not exposed to that information. We're not a part of that network of connection. Yes, they might be smart kids, because there are smart kids in the township as well. But let's not act like those connections that were built through years and years of being in those schools and meeting and mingling with people who own certain wealth. Most of the wealth class is in those schools. Let's not act like some people just got jobs because they were smart. It's also because which school you went to. And I'm going to further go on. Darling, please understand, this video is not to attack people who went to private school or to attack the wealthy or eat the rich. It's not one of those videos. But I want us to actually have an introspective conversation about this. One thing that is missing in a lot of township schools is this culture of actually recognizing excellence. It's a sporting culture, it's exposure. Most schools that I know in Gauteng are not involved in any kind of sporting activity. We don't have sports facilities. We don't have any kind of merit system that would actually elevate us. One thing that I've noticed as well about private schools, if you're going to argue that everyone just has to work hard to make it in life, think about the fact that a lot of private schools have a merit system. A merit system whereby for every achievement that you have, you get a badge on your blazer. For every achievement you have, it can be something you put on your CV. You were the captain of the netball team, you were the captain of the hockey team or the polo team or the rugby team. That goes into your CV, that goes into your motivational letters. Being in that space, it's not fair to say meritocracy when there's people in the township schools who don't have access to the sports. We don't have a merit system that awards excellence, that awards sports achievement, that allows. Whereas if you go to a private school, they have a merit system that goes onto their CV. They have professors. You can basically write a motivational letter to whatever bursaries or international institutions. You have a list of things. You have evidence of things you've done. And these put you above the township kids. Meritocracy would only work in South Africa if everyone was equal, but there's no equality. People who are born in the township or poor families, they might be excellent, they might have this talent of sport, but because there is no kind of record, there is no kind of recognition, whereas a kid from a private school, there is recognition. It's documented, it's on their blazer. They are exposed to bursaries, they are exposed to certain higher institutions because of the connection to feeder schools. And let's not get to internships. A lot of internships. A person who comes from a private school, a wealthy family, and this is not to say that every kid who's in a private school is wealthy. Some of them are there because of scholarships, but let's talk about the wealthy ones. If you come from a very wealthy family, you can afford to do an unpaid internship. Whereas someone in the township from a government school, poor working class family, I cannot afford to do an unpaid internship. I don't have a car. I don't have an apartment that's close to work. I cannot afford to come to the space. I might have an excellent mind, but I don't have the resources for me to take an unpaid internship. A lot of kids that I know who I went to varsity with took unpaid internships because you can afford to be unpaid. When all your needs are paid for by your dad, your mom, your family, it's comfortable. You don't lose anything. You gain work experience. So this idea of meritocracy, work hard, work hard. How are we all working hard when some people already are a little higher up? Like, think of it this way. Think of a short and a tall person. If we're going to say meritocracy, if a tall person and a short person were to compete and the competition is stack as many books as you can on the highest shelf, the person who's taller already has an advantage. But it's the idea that, oh no, you tall person and you short person, just work hard. But this other person's already working hard at a disadvantage. The other person's working hard, but at a certain advantage, they are tall. This is to exemplify that this idea of meritocracy, work hard, work hard. How am I working hard where I'm already behind? And this is not a victim mentality. This is a realistic analysis of how things are structured systemically. I want us to go back. Let's take a short journey down history. A short journey. Think of it. You have your grandparent who studied Bantu education. Bantu education, which basically said a lot of Black people have to learn how to do menial labor, like simple things like needlework. They were not exposed to pure mathematics, science. This is your grandparents. They give birth to your mother in the 1970s. Your mother graduates high school, but because her parents were not educated or didn't have the skills or knowledge or exposure to the other worlds, the other opportunities, they didn't know what to do with this parent, with this child who just graduated high school in the 80s or the 90s. That child goes on to try and figure out life. No exposure, no bursary, no money. There's no money in the family because the grandparents' Bantu education, no formal education. The child has some kind of education, but they don't have the money. The parents don't have the money because they couldn't afford to work a high-paying job. And that parent in the 90s that from the grandparents to the parent to the children who now get born maybe in the early 2000s, that mother who wasn't able to go to university cannot afford to take her kids to a good school, to a private school, to a good university. That trickles down. People don't realize how interconnected everything is. The grandparents had low quality education. The parent had some form of education. And the kids, and this is not to say that people were not intelligent. People were probably intelligent. They just didn't have the resources to enlighten themselves mentally. So why am I using this example? This example goes in hand with the idea that work hard when already there's systems that have been put in place that are unequal. Kids of a different racial group, white kids in the 1950s, 1960s could get a formal education. The education that they were getting wasn't a Bantu education, it was a formal education according to the British standards. Even, this is another example where I just feel like the idea of meritocracy fails. Even the Black people who were able to go to university in the 1960s and 1950s, it wasn't because they were just these excellent. It wasn't only on excellence, it was on connection. If you were Black in the 1960s and you wanted to go to university, you had to get permission from a certain minister. According to the evidence that I've gathered, you had to get permission. Not every Black person could go to a university in the 1960s. You had to get permission. You had to be affiliated with some kind of missionary or some kind of ministry or some kind of minister or political family. It even goes back to the Black people, the first batch of Black people who went to private schools. And a lot of the private schools were religious private schools because religious schools had autonomy from the government because they were obviously funded by independent funders, the church and everything. So they were the ones who started implementing non-racialism in the schools and integrating Black students into the schools. But the Black students who were able to go to these private schools, these private religiously affiliated schools, were not just the average Black person. These were the Black people who came from wealthy families or families that were affiliated with some kind of political mission or some kind of church, or they were just very wealthy. And this goes back, is it meritocracy that put these people there? Because now it trickles down. They have kids. Their kids, you have an educated grandparent. They are able to also expose their kids to a certain level of education. You build that connection. There's a lineage of connectedness to the private institutions that control and are connected to most of the wealth in the country. Because it starts in the primary schools and the high schools and everyone, the old boys, the old girls, it's connected because they eventually go into the working space and their parents are owners. They take over. There is a long lineage of connection. So for me, that's why I say the idea that you can just make it for every single person out of meritocracy is very flawed and is actually a little insensitive. It's quite insensitive actually, because we are not starting off the same footing. Some people are in certain spaces because of the legacy, the lineage that their family was aligned to. Let's not be dishonest about the fact that yes, it's possible to make it through life from hard work. But let's not ignore the fact that some of these people who are in these high up ranking spaces and who are able to get jobs easily is because of they worked hard. We know that it's because you know so-and-so, you are affiliated with this kind of family, you have knowledge, you have a friendship built through lineages of you going to these institutions. So my argument today was basically this idea that not everything is meritocracy. And yes, BEE has its flaws, but let's not be intellectually dishonest and say every person who is advocating for meritocracy only operates. Meritocracy would work only if society was already equal. And today I just wanted to show you some of the flaws of this idea of meritocracy. There is one last video that I want to share. It's from Amahle, and it talks about this idea of the talented 10th, which basically means that the concept of liberation, or the basically Black people being liberated, the concept in itself is essentially flawed because that kind of thinking by the talented 10th is a kind of thinking that promotes this idea that you have to be aligned, you have to be the perfect kind of Black person. It speaks to basically alignment, being in these spaces of kind of some kind of privilege, which talks back to, is it really meritocracy or is it alignment? Are you in the right space at the right time with the right family? So let's watch the video.
The ANC will always neglect poor people, women, and children because it was founded by the talented 10th. So it will always emulate its foundational principles. And talented 10th and how it has led to the failure of Pan-Africanism and even pro-Blackness. But so talented 10th is this concept that the only people that can save Black people are people that got a very specific university education. And back then it was very exclusive because only 5% of Black South Africans as of 2023 have a university education. Think about back then. And this was a term that was popularized by W.E.B. Du Bois. So I'm just spewing everything that's in my head. But W.E.B. Du Bois was the first Black person to get a PhD from Harvard, right? And he said the Negro race, like all races, will be will be saved by its exceptional men. And okay, what's wrong with being exceptional? The problem here is this talented man or this exceptional man will always be defined according to very assimilationist metrics, because if you think about it, all these Black people across the world had to be appealing to a British court, British Parliament. They were appealing to Westminster or to Paris or to, Lisbon or to whatever oppressor or colonial power that was shackling them at the time, whatever colonial metropole owned their country at the time, right? And so even the way that they spoke English and who could be a member, who wasn't a member, who was subordinate to who was a leader and who wasn't, it was very intentional and it was using very colonial standards. And so even when you look at the Bantu Women's League and their efforts to be a part of the ANC and the fact that they were only put in the ANC in 1931, that was a testament to the fact that, if we include women in this thing, it's not going to go according to the patriarchy that Westminster is going according to. And if we want to appeal to Westminster, we have to look exactly the same as them. We have to be as uniform as them, because a very big British colonial concept was uniformity, hence assimilation was required. And that's why when Black people from other African countries say that South Africa was the most colonized or whatever, just because South Africa is a settler colony, I beg to differ, because the way that uniformity was enforced and forced on many Black people differed per African country, but uniformity was still preached. That's why when I was in Ghana, I was shocked at the skin bleaching ads. And I'm not bashing Ghana, I'm just showing you how Eurocentrism has made its way into different African countries. But going back to Pan-Africanism, pro-Blackness, the ANC, whatever. And the ANC, must remember, all these people went to the same universities, right? All over the African continent. And then I think it's really cool that Amilcar Cabral tried to speak up against it in the 1960s or 50s or whenever he was alive. He's a Cape Verdean leader and stuff. And he was basically guys, lol, you really think that the educated class is the most qualified to speak about Black struggles when you guys only hang out with each other? You guys are a clique.
So, darling, what do you think? Do you think in a society like South Africa, the idea of meritocracy can actually work, where it's just work so hard to take yourself out of disadvantage, out of poverty? Is this a system or an idea that could actually work better than the concept of, or the system or policy of BEE? What do you think? I'm open to hearing your opinions and comments. And if you get to this part of the video, please leave a book in the comment section. And I would really appreciate if you watch the advertisements on the video. They really help me and motivate me to continue making this type of content. And thank you for watching, darling. Bye-bye.